You know, there are many times where you can feel overwhelmed by some of the smallest things, right? A lot of times you may have expectations, right? And it's something small and it soon becomes overwhelming, right? Maybe something small, gradually builds into this big old thing that's just becomes extremely overwhelming. You don't know how to handle it, and then it kind of bleeds over into other things. And then it just seems like the whole world is crashing down around you. And a lot of times, dealing with these feelings of overwhelmed, right? You can seek other people and look for help, but a lot of times your vision just gets really narrowed. You feel like you're handcuffed. You feel like there's not much you can do at that point, right? And this is where the whole overwhelming feeling comes. And one of the biggest things I've always found has really helped me get over this feeling of being overcome is to take a step back and essentially remove yourself from your environment. Because a lot of times it's the last thing we think about. A lot of times we think about going head first, right? And trying to do something productive a lot of times. And I am guilty of this myself, right? Like if I feel this feeling of overwhelmed, I feel like I gotta keep pushing, keep grinding through whatever it is, and it'll eventually work itself out. And most of the time it does work itself out. Most of the time something else will come up and it will essentially alleviate whatever that thing was that was so overwhelming, right? And I find this always helps in life is to, instead of sit and grind it out, right? Instead of sitting and leaving yourself in that environment, is to step away. And a lot of times this helps, right? It helps clear your mind a lot too. It helps you open your mind up to other possibilities and give yourself some breathing room. And one of the biggest things I always found when I start getting overwhelmed is I'll take a walk. I'll try to get closer to nature, right? And I know this may seem a little bit out there, but you find when you kind of unplug from everything, social media, you unplug from the TV, all these other different outlets, and instead you give yourself some you time, right? And you go out in nature and take a walk, right? And one of my favorite things to do is to actually go, right? There's a Battlefield, state park here. And so I go and I walk there, and it's just so beautiful, right? You walk through the fields and everything, the trails are beautiful, and it really opens up your mind, right? And all that stress that you initially had walking, when you started walking, it gradually dissipates. And you realize that, this big old thing that you created in your mind, because that's essentially what it is, right? You create this big, overwhelming thing in your mind, and it essentially stops you from doing anything else, right? It prevents you from doing anything else and pulls away from other things, right? Because the overwhelming thing soon leads to stress and many other different things. So the biggest thing is to just get out of that environment. Take a walk, get some air. You realize that when you breathe in that fresh air, get out in nature for a little while, your head starts to clear up, and your head really looks at that situation and can, readjust it, right? And allow yourself to become one essentially with what the real bottom line problem is, right? And you realize that about halfway through you start coming up with all these ideas and how you can essentially attack whatever that was, right? That thing that seemed like it's been blown out of proportion, and it breaks it down to the basics. And you take these couple steps, and sometimes even that first step that you take, right? When after this walk, you come up with that first step that you're gonna take, and that first step can normally alleviate whatever it was that you thought it was. And a lot of times these small things that we blow up and become overwhelming, can be easily answered by somebody else. Maybe this overwhelming thing, right? Maybe there's something to do with a previous relationship or something. Well, maybe if you just talked to that person, right? And clarify what it was, a lot of times that can alleviate this feeling of being overwhelmed, right? Or perhaps you can look for options, right? Ask around. Maybe there's, maybe you lost your job or something and you don't know, where to look, right? And perhaps, get in touch with some of those people your previous employers, or perhaps start your own thing, or whatever the case is. And this is things that can help you alleviate a lot of those things of being overwhelmed, right? Because there's a lot of other things out there that are right underneath our nose that can help us, that are answers, that are opportunities to answer those questions. And a lot of times we just let that thought linger, right? And that lingering of that thought leads to this bigger overwhelming thing over here that essentially just dominates your life and gives you tunnel vision and causes you to stress and causes anxiety and all these other different things. So to get over this feeling of being overwhelmed, to get out of your environment, to come up with that first step, those first thoughts, those ideas, and then start executing on those. And if you need to, keep yourself out of that environment for a while, or switch it up and get out and perhaps, work out a little bit. That helps. I know that helps me a lot. Like, there's a lot of times if a walk doesn't help, I'll typically run, I'll work out, or perhaps, just take a drive. You just gotta break the monotony of the routine. And a lot of times that's all it takes, is for you to refocus. And that's not to say to go out and do something that's going to cause you to not really think about the particular situation, right? Yes, I know it seems overwhelming, but once you get yourself out of that environment, once you pull yourself out and you start looking at it, right, you need to actually take the time and think about it, but give yourself time to get out of the environment. Once you're out of the environment, then reevaluate it, right? Maybe that's even going to a hotel for a night, right? Don't even sleep at your apartment or your house, and just go rent a hotel room and spend the night there, right? And just, unplug from everything and just sit with that thought and see what that thought would actually do, right? You find that you come up with answers pretty good on your own, right? You don't need anybody's input to help alleviate that, right? Now, sometimes talking to people, yes, that helps alleviate some situations, but ultimately, it's coming down to you, right? You're the one that's holding on to that thought. You're the one that let it, grow to this crazy thing, right? That's just essentially taken over your life. And so, if you can spend the time on it, you realize that you'll come up with an answer. And you realize that it's not as bad as you thought it was, that you realize you come up with the steps that can easily be executed and take care of that thing, right? And one of the biggest things I've found that's helped is to also, chunk it down. A lot of times these overwhelming things, they seem so, they seem like Mount Everest, right? Like, you're never gonna reach the top. They seem like there's no way you're gonna be able to achieve whatever it is that needs to get done at whatever time, whatever the situation is, right? But the biggest thing is to chunk it down. And when you're doing this, when you're going through this thought process by yourself, you realize that a lot of the steps you can take are basic that would help the situation and slowly progress, right? Sometimes it's even immediate, where the first step can be immediate. And a lot of times maybe it's 1 or 2 steps and it's done, it's completed, and you don't have to worry about it. And the biggest thing is to not get deterred, right? Not to let that overwhelming thing control your life anymore, and to take a step back and also realize that there shouldn't be anything in life that is that overwhelming, right? Now, yes, there's certain obligations we may have, there's certain responsibilities we may have, but try to maintain a good mindset before stuff even like that happens. That's one of the biggest things I found has really helped, is by, doing meditation, doing things to where you're not labeling stuff as positive or negative, and allowing yourself to essentially not put any filter on anything, just to let things come as they may be, right? Realize that maintaining this kind of mindset will actually prevent a lot of these overwhelming feelings, right? And this essentially can help you maintain that and maintain that calm, happier state, right? As opposed to, being stressed out and becoming overwhelmed with stuff because you got too much stuff going on. And that's also one of the biggest things. If you feel that your day is overwhelming, maybe you need to reevaluate your day, right? Maybe you need to audit your day. Maybe you're trying to do too much. And I think a lot of times we do that, right? We're so busy that we try to do too much, as opposed to, focusing on, possibly 3 to 4 things and just focus on them, right? And everything else is essentially a byproduct. It happens, but your priority is those three things, right? Like, I think a big one would be to get your sleep, right? To take care of your health, and then whatever obligations you have, and then plus, you know, if there's a job or something that helps pay the bills, obviously, stuff like that. Focus on specific things and only those things, right? Don't stretch yourself thin. When you start stretching yourself thin is when you become overwhelmed, because you're trying to accomplish and execute all these other things, where if you can execute one thing, you know, the best thing to do is to try to manage your time as best as you can. And I know during this whole time it can be overwhelming trying to do all these different things. So just do one thing at a time, make sure it's done, you know, execute on a daily basis, and keep that mindset, right? And adopt meditation or, you know, some kind of mindfulness into your life, right? And allow yourself to stop labeling things, and you realize that the stress will go away. And don't allow yourself to go to bed in that state either, right? This is why I talk about meditation a lot, because it helps alleviate a lot of that stuff, and not to essentially have any input before you go to bed, right? So no social media, no TV, none of these other inputs, because you get those inputs that cause you to think about other things that you may not actually consciously be thinking about. But, you know, you may go to bed and then all of a sudden this thought or idea may have come from possibly the news or something, and can lead you to feel overwhelmed. So you need to also audit your day, right? And see what exactly could be causing a lot of these feelings of emotion that cause you to stress out and become overwhelmed. So if this has helped you guys, remember to hit that like button on the way out. And until next time, I will see you guys later.